Picture this. A human being, thousands of years ago, sitting by a fire under the night sky. They look up, staring at the endless spread of stars. Then they look down, noticing their own hands, their breath, their thoughts racing inside their mind. Two directions, two mysteries. The universe and the self. And for as long as we've told stories, drawn symbols, or asked questions, humanity has been chasing these mysteries. But here's the twist. When it comes to the self, when it comes to understanding who we are and why we think, feel, and act the way we do, two great traditions emerged. On one side, philosophy, the tool of rational thought, abstract reasoning, and fearless speculation. It asks the timeless questions: what is reality? What can we know? What is a good life? On the other side, psychology, the science of the mind, rooted in experiments, data, and observation. It asks, how does memory work? Why do emotions overwhelm us? What shapes our behavior? Both explore the human experience, both aims to help us understand ourselves, but they do so in profoundly different ways. And in this video, we're going to take a journey through both philosophy and psychology. We'll see where they diverge, where they overlap, and how together they tell the story of what it means to be human. Let's start at the beginning. Because psychology, as we know it today, is actually quite young, barely 150 years old as a formal science, philosophy, on the other hand, is ancient. It stretches back thousands of years to the earliest civilizations where people began asking questions not just about survival, but about existence itself. Imagine ancient Greece, bustling marketplaces, temples to the gods, whispers of myths and legends. But in the middle of all this, a man in sandals walks around asking uncomfortable questions. His name, Socrates. Socrates didn't write books, he simply asked questions. What is justice? What is courage? How should one live? His student Plato turned those questions into dialogues, like little philosophical plays. And in one of the most famous, The Allegory of the Cave, he gave us a story. Imagine prisoners chained in a cave, mistaking shadows on a wall for reality itself. What happens if one escapes and sees the truth outside? Philosophy, at its heart, was about this kind of questioning, going beyond appearances, digging beneath the surface. Now, across the world, other traditions were doing the same. In India, thinkers were writing the Upanishads, asking about the soul and ultimate reality. In China, Confucius spoke of ethics, while Laozi spoke of harmony with the Tao. All of this was philosophy, rational reflection on the biggest questions of life. But here, the key point, philosophy didn't just ask questions about the stars or morality. It also asked questions about the mind itself. Aristotle, Plato's student, studied memory, dreams, and perception. He wondered, why do we remember some things and forget others? What is imagination? How does desire move us to act? This was psychology before psychology had a name. For centuries, psychology lived inside philosophy. It was just one branch of a larger tree. The same people debating truth and reality were also debating the mind and behavior. Fast forward to the 1600s, Europe, the scientific revolution is in full swing, telescopes, mathematics, new laws of physics. And here, a philosopher named René Descartes sat by his fireplace and asked, how do I even know anything is real? I think, therefore I am. That was his conclusion. The mind, for Descartes, was certain, but the body, the physical world, that was less reliable. He also imagined the mind and body as two separate things, a view that would spark centuries of debate, both in philosophy and, later, in psychology. By the 1800s, though, something started to shift. Scholars realized questions about the mind didn't just need speculation, they needed experiments. And that's where psychology as a science began to break away. In 1879, in a quiet laboratory in Leipzig, Germany, a man named Wilhelm Wundt did something revolutionary. He invited students to sit in a lab, listen to sounds, watch lights, and then report their experiences in detail. It sounds simple, maybe even boring, but this was radical. For the first time, someone wasn't just speculating about the mind, they were trying to measure it. This is considered the official birth of psychology as an independent science. From there, psychology exploded into different schools of thought. Sigmund Freud in Vienna, exploring the unconscious and dreams. Ivan Pavlov in Russia, discovering conditioned responses with dogs. B.F. Skinner in America, studying behavior and reinforcement. Each of these pioneers wanted to understand human beings, not just through reflection, but through observation, data, and experiment. But here's the fascinating part. Even as psychology broke away from philosophy, the two remained deeply connected. Because philosophy had given psychology its questions. And psychology, with its experiments, often forced philosophy to rethink its answers. So here we are, with two traditions, philosophy and psychology, both trying to decode the human experience. Philosophy, abstract, rational, timeless. Psychology, experimental, scientific, data-driven. But before we compare them directly, let's slow down. Let's actually step inside each world, one at a time. In the next chapter, we'll walk through philosophy's unique method, the art of reasoning itself, and we'll see how, for thousands of years, thinkers have used it to navigate the deepest mysteries of existence. If psychology is the science of the lab, philosophy is the art of the armchair. But don't let that image fool you. Philosophy is not laziness, it's discipline, a discipline of the mind. Philosophy begins with something simple, a question. What is truth? What does it mean to live a good life? Can we trust our senses? Do we have free will, or are we just acting out a script written by physics, biology, or fate? Unlike psychology, which would design an experiment or gather data, philosophy does something else. It uses reasoning. It builds arguments like architects build structures. Let's take an example. Imagine you're walking along a beach. You see footprints in the sand. Do you need a scientific experiment to know someone has walked there? Not really. You reason it out. Footprints imply feet. This is what philosophers do with abstract concepts. They look at clues, our experiences, our language, our moral intuitions, and they reason toward deeper truths. Philosophy has its own toolbox. Logic, this is the engine of reasoning. If A implies B and A is true, then B must be true. Logicians from Aristotle to Bertrand Russell developed systems to test the strength of arguments. Thought experiments. Instead of labs, philosophers use the imagination. Descartes imagined an evil demon tricking him into believing the world existed. John Searle imagined a Chinese room to question whether computers can truly understand language. Dialectic, the back and forth of argument, debate, and counter-argument. Socrates made it famous. He'd ask questions until his opponent contradicted themselves, revealing hidden assumptions. Philosophy is slow, meticulous, and often frustrating. It doesn't give you charts, graphs, or brain scans. Instead, it gives you clarity, or at least, a deeper sense of what the real question actually is. Over time, philosophy split into branches, each asking a different kind of question. Metaphysics, what is reality made of? Is there a soul? Are numbers real or just inventions? Epistemology, what can we know for certain? Are our senses reliable? What about intuition? Ethics, what is right and wrong? How should we treat each other? Is morality universal or relative? Aesthetics, what is beauty? Why do we respond to art? Political philosophy, what is justice? What makes a society fair? These questions aren't scientific in the narrow sense. You can't put morality in a test tube. But philosophy still matters because it frames the problems that science, including psychology, often picks up later. What makes philosophy especially cinematic is that it thrives on stories. Plato gave us the cave. Descartes gave us the dream and the demon. Nietzsche gave us Zarathustra and the idea of eternal recurrence. Philosophy wraps abstract ideas in narrative so they stick in the imagination. And maybe that's why philosophy has survived for millennia. It gives us a way to tell stories about the invisible, about truth, meaning, and existence itself. But eventually, philosophy ran into a problem. It could think endlessly, but without experiments, it risked floating too far from reality. And that's where psychology stepped in. If philosophy is the candle, psychology is the microscope. Philosophy asks, what is consciousness? Psychology asks, what happens in the brain when someone makes a choice? Psychology is the attempt to take the invisible, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and make them measurable. Psychology doesn't rely on thought experiments. Instead, it uses experiments, test groups, variables, and controls, surveys and interviews, gathering data about how people think and feel, observation, watching behavior in natural or controlled settings, brain imaging, fMRI scans, EEGs, ways of peering into the living brain. For example, take memory. A philosopher might ask, is memory reliable? But a psychologist like Elizabeth Loftus would run experiments showing how easily memory can be manipulated, how witnesses can be tricked into remembering things that never happened. Psychology didn't start unified. It began with rival schools of thought, each claiming to explain the mind. Structuralism, Wundt, Titchener, break the mind into its smallest parts like chemistry. Functionalism, William James, forget the parts, focus on how mental processes serve survival. Psychoanalysis, Freud, the unconscious, repression, dreams, childhood. Behaviorism, Skinner, Watson, forget the mind, just study behavior you can see. Humanistic psychology, Rogers, Maslow, focus on growth, potential, and meaning. Cognitive psychology, the mind as an information processor, like a computer. Over time, psychology blended these into a powerful science. Psychology's strength is that it gives us evidence, but it also gives us stories. Pavlov's dogs salivating at the sound of a bell. Skinner's pigeons learning to push levers. The tragic story of little Albert, a child conditioned to fear white rats. The inspiring story of therapy patients overcoming trauma through new techniques. Where philosophy provokes thought, psychology shows results. Together, they give us two sides of the same coin. Now here, where things get interesting, philosophy and psychology didn't just separate and stay apart. They constantly circle back to each other. Philosophy asks, do we have free will? Psychology asks, what happens in the brain when people make choices? Philosophy asks, what is consciousness? Psychology uses brain scans to study awareness, attention, and dreams. Philosophy asks, what is morality? Psychology studies moral decision-making, empathy, and bias. Sometimes psychology gives philosophy new data to think about. Sometimes philosophy gives psychology new frameworks to test. It's a dialogue. AI and consciousness. Can machines think? Philosophers debate it, but psychologists run experiments on how humans treat AI assistants. Ethics of experiments. Should we deceive participants? Philosophy of ethics sets the boundaries, psychology follows them. The mind-body problem. Philosophy asks whether the mind is separate from the brain. Psychology tests what happens to personality when the brain is injured. The two are locked in a dance, abstract and empirical, speculative and experimental. This isn't just academic, it's personal. Imagine someone facing heartbreak. Philosophy might ask, what does this say about love, about the nature of attachment? Psychology might ask, what's happening in their brain chemistry, how long until they feel better? Imagine someone facing a moral dilemma at work. Philosophy gives them frameworks, utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics. Psychology gives them tools, understanding bias, stress, decision fatigue. In our daily lives, we are constantly using both, even without realizing it. When you pause and reflect, what kind of person do I want to be? You're doing philosophy. When you take a personality test, read about habits, or go to therapy, you're doing psychology. Together, they make us more human. Neither field is perfect. Philosophy's weakness, it can get lost in abstraction, thousands of years of debate and no final answers. Psychology's weakness, it risks reducing humans to data points, numbers on a chart, neurons firing. Philosophy gives depth, but not proof. Psychology gives evidence, but sometimes lacks meaning. That's why they need each other. Philosophy reminds psychology of the big picture. Psychology grounds philosophy in reality. So where do we go from here? Technology is advancing. Brain scans grow sharper, AI grows smarter. Psychology will measure things we never dreamed of. But philosophy, it still asks the questions science alone cannot answer. What is consciousness? What is the meaning of life in a world of algorithms? Should we merge with AI or resist it? The future of human self-understanding is not one path, but two walking side by side. So what have we seen? Philosophy, the voice that asks. Psychology, the lens that measures. One is the mirror, the other is the lab. One is the candle, the other is the microscope. Both are trying to answer the same question, who are we? And maybe, just maybe, the real power comes not from choosing between them, but from letting them walk together. Philosophy giving us the why, psychology giving us the how. And together, they light up the deepest mystery of all, the human experience.